Hello and welcome to Exchange Traded People. I'm your host, Michael Reardon, and today's guest is Manooj Mistry, COO of HANetf. Manooj, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for joining. So Manooj, I kind of like to break these up into kind of two parts, these conversations. First of all, talking a little bit about you for maybe people who don't know. Lots of people will recognize your name, but maybe they don't know who the man is behind the name. So a little bit about you, and then to go into the your insights and views on the industry. So to dive kind of straight in, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but coming from Indian heritage, Asian heritage, I knew what my parents wanted. So they wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer.
Right.
So that was their ambition for me, and I think I didn't have the heart to tell them that I was squeamish. But I always had an interest in economics, and when I got to secondary school, and I got the chance to do a subject called Economics and Public Affairs for my GCSE, and there really enjoyed the subject, and then I was able to do economics for my A levels, and also as part of my degree. So kind of from that stage, always thought I'd get into finance. I didn't know what, but right. I sort of felt finance was my calling. And around the age of 14, when I did my GCSEs, my parents also set up their own little business, a corner shop, and so at that time, sort of getting a bit of a business hat, an entrepreneur as well. So I think it broke my parents' hearts when I said I don't want to be a doctor. But hopefully they're okay with it now. But I think
I'm sure they've recovered subsequently. Yeah. What was so you knew you wanted to get into finance. What was your first job in finance then?
I sort of after university, I missed out. I didn't do the usual graduate schemes or anything. So after I left university, I did a couple of temp jobs, but then I applied for a job. And in the old days, you didn't have sort of jobs on the internet or so it was actually an old-fashioned newspaper article. Right. And in the article, it said looking for numerate and literate graduates for a financial firm. So I applied for it, and the firm, it was called Johnson Fry.
Right.
And it was a small kind of boutique financial services firm where the Fry in the name was the CEO.
Right.
So the company was like 20 years old when I joined, and it had about 100 employees. And I got the job, and the company itself is now part of Franklin Templeton. So initially it was acquired by Legg Mason,
right,
and then by Franklin Templeton. But when I joined, as I said, it did a variety of things or activities as part of its business. And I actually had amazing exposure to do a lot of things. So I started my life actually on the alt side.
Okay.
So I did. So at the time, you're probably familiar with the Enterprise Investment Scheme, and Venture Capital Trust. So I actually worked on those schemes, those type of products initially. So raising money from retail investors with the tax breaks to invest in property and sort of venture capital. So I did that, and then from there evolved into investment products. And the first exposure to indexing I had was doing insurance-linked bonds. So sort of equity-linked bonds issued by insurance companies. And basically, at the time, Johnson Fry had a distribution arm. So they had, similar to Hargreaves, they had lots of retail investors. So basically, they were developing these products and then selling them into their retail network. So I started doing the first sort of equity-linked products. From there, I had a stint as an active manager as well. So I worked on some active which I did for about 18 months, but I learned quite a lot. But then I wanted to go back to continuing to do product. And also kind of when I was at Johnson Fry, I started working on sort of closed-ended funds issued in Ireland.
Right.
And the background to that was the predecessor of the ISA used to be called a PEP, a personal equity plan. And basically you had a general PEP allowance and a single company PEP allowance. And by doing this closed-ended fund structure in Ireland, you could use both allowances. So we started doing products linked to that. And one of the products I worked on was it was called a 2020 hindsight bond, which basically at the end of the 5-year investment term basically gave you exposure to 3 markets, and it was weighted by the best performing. So it was like S&P, MSCI Europe, and Japan or whatever. And as a result of working on that product, we were using Merrill Lynch as a swap counterparty at the time. And on the back of that, Merrill Lynch basically asked me, did I want to come and work on something called exchange traded funds? This was back in 1999. Wow. And Merrill Lynch had basically seen the success of ETFs in the US in the 90s with the QQQs, SPY, and all that. Yeah. And they basically were working at the time with Dow Jones and the stock exchanges that created the stocks indices. And at the time, it was Dow Jones, the Deutsche Börse, the predecessor of Euronext Paris, and the Swiss exchange. Right. And basically, it was a joint venture between Merrill Lynch and those 4 companies to launch the first ETFs in Europe. And the project name at the time was called Drivers. And I joined in August 99 and basically had been kicked off the ground, but hadn't gone too far. And I was brought in to basically get it done. And at the time, it was obviously unknown territory for me. So looking at how the US had done it and how they sort of launched the product. And it was uncharted territory within the UCITS. Started to work on that, and then working with Bank of New York. You probably know Tony O'Brien. He was at Bank of New York at the time, so partnered up with him to sort of get the first ETFs launched. It was groundbreaking stuff. And I always say that we knew that we were in competition with BGI iShares at the time because they were launched ISF. So it was a little bit like a race to the moon. And I'll always wear my badge of honor to say that we beat iShares by 2 weeks to launch the first European ETF. So, it was very interesting, and I think it was all new. And I remember it was very difficult with the regulators at the time because obviously it was new. The central bank wasn't too bad, but then when in the old days of UCITS, you then obviously passported into different countries, and in those days it was a 60-day authorization process. Right. And on the 59th day of the 60 days, they could come back and ask you questions, and the application would start again. So luckily, I think UK and Germany were authorized quite quickly within the 60 days. Yeah. But then Southern Europe, we're trying to obviously access France and Italy as well. But they took longer. And then Switzerland obviously was outside UCITS, but they recognized UCITS. Yeah. It was a bit sort of my first interaction with regulators and trying to explain and educate them on how the products work and what the purpose was. And I think one of the things that always threw them was, why is it such a high minimum subscription size? And then you try and explain, because that's for the market makers and APs, and investors buy it on the exchange and things like that. So those were the early days. And I was at Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch had its ETF business, and we launched in April 2000, and we launched the first 2 products, which was on the Eurostoxx and Stocks 50 indices. And then we also launched a family of global sectors back in probably 2001, and they were FTSE global sectors, but they were way ahead of their time. And I also remember iShares had launched some European sectors, and both of us actually shut the products down. Right. Because it was too early in the game for ETFs. And also in 2001, we obviously had the .com crash, 9/11, and I was all of this time I was sitting within the investment bank of Merrill Lynch, and Merrill Lynch basically sort of started to assess, do they want to be involved? Is more an asset management business? And although the colleagues at Mercury Asset Management, Merrill Lynch Investment, they were the investment manager, the bank was footing the bill basically. So they decided, okay, we don't see this as a long-term growth business. So basically, the business was sold to BGII shares in 2003. I hung around for a couple of years. I decided I'd do something, try something new, different. And then so that was 2003, and until 2005, I was doing UCITS platforms at structured funds at Merrill Lynch. This is where the big innovation was UCITS 3. I'm sure you remember that. And UCITS 3 basically was a game changer in that allowed funds to use swaps. And basically there was a consistent set of rules. And I think all the banks were doing it, Deutsche, SocGen, and everyone. So that was my introduction into doing swap-based funds.
Right.
And then at the end of 2005, early 2006, was approached by Deutsche Bank, and they already had 2 ETFs on the platform, on their platform, which were done actually with DWS, the asset manager.
Right.
They wanted to do more, and they asked me if I would be interested, and I always felt that I had some unfinished business with ETFs. Right. So I was happily. So when they asked, I was more than happy to take the opportunity, and then teamed up with Thorsten Michalik at Deutsche Bank at the time, and we were still on the sell side, and we built the X-Trackers platform. I think, that was a great opportunity, and I think when I joined in 2006, Deutsche was still kind of in its growth phase, so they were to invest and sort of support the business.
You ended up being there about what 15 years or so, were you?
14 years in the end, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a good stint. Of those 14 years, 6 were on the investment bank, and then 8 in asset management. So when we were in the investment bank, we obviously majored on launching the swap-based ETF. So that was and I think I remember probably within the first 6 months, I think we brought about 40 to 50 products to market across equities and fixed income. And basically, as I said, there was a big commitment from Deutsche at the time. They saw the opportunity. And we were fast growing. I think at the time, iShares was obviously established. I think they just acquired the Hypervariance index change ETF business. Lixil was going strong. So we were the challenger coming into the market.
Definitely. And then Hector came along with his charm offensive and managed to bring you over to Han. Yeah,
that was in beginning of 2021 now. So 4 years ago. There was I think I'd reached that stage in my career where I'd done an entrepreneurial role in big companies, and I think you get to a stage where you can only be an entrepreneur until the business gets to a certain size, and then you fall into the kind of the structure of an organization. And at that time I was ready to go back to being an entrepreneur. And as I mentioned, I started my career at Johnson Fry, which was a owner-led smaller business, and obviously was even smaller. I think when I joined, there was about 20 people. But originally, when I met Hector, I've known Hector for many years, but when he told me about Han in 2017, I jokingly did say to him, one day I'll come and work for you. So he must have remembered that, and he held me to it. So, I thought it was an interesting opportunity, and coming back to a smaller organization, being more entrepreneurial. So it was the right time in my career to do that.
So would you describe yourself as a product guy or a business builder or a bit of a jack of all hands?
That's a good question, because my daughters always ask me that, and I never have an answer. So what do you do for your job? Like that's when I wish I'd been a doctor, then I could give them an easy answer. But I guess my passion, is product and building businesses.
Right.
I think I don't think I've just built product for the sake of it. So you build stuff to grow and develop your business. And as I said, I did try asset management, portfolio management, early in my career. And then when I was at Deutsche DWS, I oversaw the portfolio management teams there. So that was part of my responsibilities. But yeah, I think I was always had, and I think unlike, say, active management within indexing, I think product is where you want to be, because it's developing the ideas, developing into a concept. And obviously the portfolio management team is also important, but they're basically taking the rules based and implementing it in the most efficient way. So, but yeah, no, I think that kind of product was my role. And coming to Han as a white label platform, obviously, you get a lot of variety of product and variety of clients. So I think it's suits my capabilities.
Yeah. Well, obviously you've been around the block a few times now. Like what are the learnings that you've taken from your career so far, and what advice would you give your younger self now?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think I'm probably going to repeat a lot of cliches here, but I think sort of one thing I've always learned is that you should be yourself, be genuine. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. I think eventually you get found out. I think that's quite important. And then the other thing is important is treat others how you'd like to be treated. Sort of, I think treating people with respect. I think there's a lot to be said about that. And then I think the other thing which I always say to people when they're starting your career working is don't have any regrets. Sort of don't look back and say, "Oh, I wish I'd done that."
Yeah,
I think try to minimize those as much as possible. And if you do make a mistake, you learn from your mistake. And we're all going to make mistakes. It's not like everyone's going to have a perfect career trajectory. So we'll do that. And I think the other thing which I've enjoyed, I've been working 30 plus years now, is that I've always enjoyed learning. I think hopefully I can do that till retire. But I think we work in an industry where it's always moving, dynamic, and I never stop learning. I think that's been important. And the final bit, or two final things I wanted to say, was that hard work does pay off, but I think working smarter is even better. So I think you don't have, I think sort of, and by working smarter, I think it just means how you position yourself, how you manage your team. I was very lucky at DWS. I got to build a team, and I knew that I had to surround myself with smart people to build that team, get people in who can help you achieve what you want to do. And I really enjoyed that. And then final words of wisdom I just say is that it does go quickly. I'm sure you find that.
Yeah.
Time flies, and make sure you enjoy what you do. And
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So all of those are all super wise points. So you just said 30 years career. So when you now with all the kind of knowledge and experience at hand, when you look at younger people starting off in their careers who maybe are not ticking all of those boxes, first of all, do you see a lot of kind of the younger generation who don't tick some of those boxes? For example, a lot of young people are accused of they don't work hard, they expect everything to kind of come to them, and there's this sense of entitlement. Do you kind of observe that, or do you see actually, no, these are really smart people, they're doing all the right things? If I was in their shoes, there's nothing I would kind of do differently?
Yeah, no.
Or are you shaking your head going, what the hell are you doing?
I do think it's a generational thing, because I think you and I have children as well, and I think that generation is going to be different as well. But yeah, no, when you and I first started out, we were told to keep our heads down, work hard, and you'll eventually get rewarded. But that's not the way now. It's different. The sort of the people coming out of university and building their careers, they see it very, very differently, and they want to probably have a more balanced lifestyle. I think one thing to see is that they're not afraid to try new things, which maybe nowadays be maybe a bit more cautious.
Yeah.
So, and that's good, because I think they see that work is there to be enjoyed, experience new things. So I think they're not afraid to do that. So maybe it comes across like lack of commitment, or maybe a sense of entitlement. And I think to us, I think because we went through it, we kind of we didn't know any better. But I think the younger generation are smarter than us.
That's true. No, you're right. It's generated like nothing stays the same, right? Everything is different for different generations. So you what we experienced, you can't expect everybody else to follow the same path. As someone who's been called the father of ETFs in Europe, what have been your observations of the industry since you first started off in it? Like, it's changed massively, right?
No, it's obviously starting at zero, so just over 25 years ago now. And like even like 25 years ago when we started out, index investing was not mainstream. I think it was a preserve of institutional investors like pension funds. So you had like the likes of BGI, State Street sort of dominating that market for the pension funds and the institutional market, whereas it wasn't mass market or retail. So I think one thing ETFs did was kind of revolutionize index investing and basically brought it to the masses. And I think our industry always says that it's the most democratic investment product, basically giving retail investors access to what the institutions buy. And I think it basically kind of grew index investing and took it from probably less than I think globally, probably less than 5% to now sort of 30-40% of total assets under management. I think in Europe now it's 25%. So I think that growth is going to continue. I don't think it's stopped growing, but definitely index investing has kind of been brought to the mainstream. And I think sort of obviously within that also is that you've seen a lot of innovation, and you sort of the way I've always seen it is that with innovation, what are you providing it? Or what are you providing? Are you providing something that the market wants? Or are you providing something which you think the market wants?
Yeah.
And
two different things.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it's always very important that you do the former in terms of what the market wants, and within that, I think you see that ETFs have given access to or ETPs have given access to asset classes which were not traditionally accessible, like Nick and Hector did it with ETF-curious with the gold products, but just generally like emerging markets and all different types of strategies were kind of brought to the market. And I think sort of what ETFs also did was change the asset and wealth management industry for the better. In that, I remember back in the early 2000s, if you wanted to buy an index fund, I think you'd pay like Virgin 1% per annum. I think Virgin had some FTSE 100 trackers, but I think you were paying north of 100 basis or close to 100 basis points for those products. But obviously, once the first ETFs were launched, they were probably 45, 50 basis points, and now they're obviously lower. But it basically sort of put a focus on value for money.
Yeah.
Like, is my investment delivering what I need? Also, I think it's brought a lot more accountability in terms of the giving people or making investment decisions for people. So especially like in the wealth management, where maybe you weren't focused on delivering best value, but I think with all the regulatory changes which have accompanied the growth of ETFs, and I would say that regulation has been a friend of ETFs on the whole. Within that space, I think it's basically transformed the industry to be very much focused on value for money, giving good products, good value, good sort of access to different types of markets. And I very much see that this revolution is going to continue, or this evolution is going to continue with the active industry.
Yeah.
So obviously, active mutual funds have, I think, been around for 100 years now, and the ETF wrapper can very much kind of bring them into the 21st century, the traditional mutual fund. And I think sort of what I see is that in the old days, ETFs were seen as a wrapper for index products, and you always had the kind of association of the word cheap or low cost with ETFs. But I think nowadays, it's very much a wrapper, an access vehicle to allow any asset manager who wants to either enter a new market. So someone, say a US manager coming to Europe, why launch a mutual fund? Just go straight to an ETF. And I always use the analogy is that skip the landline, go straight to mobile.
Yeah.
That's what asset managers. And then also, like in Europe, obviously, Europe is a lot more fragmented than the US.
Yeah.
So if you're a UK manager and you want to access the continental Europe, then ETF wrapper provides you with that choice by virtue of listing on an exchange. Your product is there, and then you work out how you do your distribution and marketing. Whereas in the old days, you'd have to build the infrastructure for distributing your mutual fund, etc. So I think it's definitely sort of a wrapper which can be a friend to the active industry, which, as we were talking earlier, is a big surprise in terms of the pace at which it's happened. Obviously, the growth of active in the US was very much driven by tax reason. Here, it's a different type of reason, but yeah, I myself has been surprised by how much it has or is taking off at the moment. I think one thing which I sort of see is that there's obviously a lot of talk about ETFs now giving access to alternatives or credit and
private asset space. Yeah.
Where I'm not convinced that is the best path for ETFs. I genuinely think like ETFs are there for people who want to trade them intraday. So it makes sense if your underlying investments are liquid and tradable. If they're not liquid and tradable, then don't put them in an ETF. You can still use a daily traded mutual fund if you need to, but it doesn't have to be part of doesn't have to be the ETF. And also, I think one thing which, and I think you commented on one of your articles, was there's a challenge when it comes to market making and providing liquidity. Like you don't want to have too many black box strategies. You want to have strategies which people can see how they trade, and then you're going to encourage sort of tight spreads and trading in them. And I think like obviously this is a trend we're seeing. I think definitely makes sense for liquid strategies within the ETF wrap.
Do you think that if the industry kind of like forces a path down the kind of private asset space, it will kind of end up shooting itself in the foot? Because something could go wrong at some point in time and do irreversible kind of reputational damage to the ETF structure.
Yeah, no, I think we need to be mindful, and as an industry, we need to be responsible to make sure that doesn't happen. I think like at HANetf as a white label platform, we get lots of requests. So we see some of see a lot of ideas which wouldn't work in an ETF. So, but obviously, we always say is that just because you put it in an ETF doesn't make it better. You just think about how it's going to be managed. Can you provide liquidity?
I think a lot of people think, if I put it in an ETF, it's like some sort of like a magic bullet, right? It's it's not, right?
And then the performance still counts, and that's what investors, when they want value for money, make sure that they're getting the returns. You're generating the alpha for them. So.
Speaking of like Han, so when we were kind of talking before we started recording that, like when you joined Han were like the only white label ETF provider in Europe. Now that's changed. Do you kind of expect to see kind of more and more new, like, well, we're already seeing more new white label entrants coming to the market. Do you see that continuing, or do you kind of think, well, it'll get to a point in time where it's kind of maxed out, there's not space for any more? How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, if you look at the kind of mutual fund space and the alternative space, there's lots of white label platforms. So these already exist in those ones.
Good point. Yeah.
So no, I think for us as Han, competition is healthy. I think it validates the concept, and so far most of the entrants coming in or new entrants coming in have typically been a subsidiary or a side business of someone else, of someone doing something else.
Yeah,
It's
true.
not the main sort of bread and butter. And I think we at Han, we can differentiate ourselves.
It is your bread and butter. Yeah, it's the only thing you do. Yeah,
that's all we do. We've got 45 people just building and
well, you've got 45 people now. Wow. Wow.
Building and looking after ETFs and distributing and marketing them. So that's all we do all day long. So I think that's an important consideration. And you've worked in product, you've worked at ETF issuers, you know that there's a lot of unknowns.
Very true.
And you only experience them once you're in the deep end and you're running these products. So and we've had like 7-8 years of doing this now, and the people in the team are much more experienced. So we've had a lifetime of doing it. So.
Yeah. No, that's very true. So you mentioned like active management, and you said you were kind of surprised by the adoption of, let's say, the traditional mutual fund space of the ETF wrapper, and then we touched a little bit about the private asset space, but like kind of looking down the line, like beyond active ETFs, because I don't see kind of active ETFs as being the next thing. They're already kind of here and now, right? So what is in your mindset, and when you look like from your viewpoint, what is the next big thing? Where's going to be that next catalyst of growth beyond the kind of the active space?
Good question. I think sort of there's obviously there's a lot of different types of strategies within active, and as I said earlier, like it's probably going to resonate well with the more liquid type of investments. I think sort of in many ways, like the growth you're seeing in active is being driven by growth in retail investing. So I think traditionally Europe has not had an equity culture like the US, which I think has helped their ETF business sort of grow much faster than it has in Europe. I think we're entering that phase. We're going to have this equity culture or investing culture in Europe, and I think
you see that coming like from the kind of the younger generation.
Exactly, yeah. So the older generation might have bought their financial products through an IFA, through their bank or insurance company. The younger generation is doing it all on their apps.
On their app,
So they're doing it online, and maybe sort of obviously they don't have the wealth at the moment, but there's going to be a passing of wealth between the generations. And within that, I think you will see that younger generations will invest directly, so not going through an intermediary or through another institution. And I think that's where the industry is positioning itself, is to be ready for that growth. And as you know, like a lot of these platforms are very ETF friendly, like the Robos and the neo brokers, etc. So I think it's getting into that space where you need to have your offering on the shelf, basically. I think so. I think in terms of the markets and the type of strategies, I don't think you're going to see as much innovation. Like there'll always be something new, something different. But I think the majority of the assets in ETFs are going to be in market cap indices. And then you obviously have things like thematics, or which can be active or passive or whatever, and then the niche. But on the whole, I think it's now about getting into those distribution channels and positioning yourself as a wrapper to do that. And like obviously at the moment, ETFs are the most suitable wrapper for doing that versus the traditional mutual fund. But maybe in 5 years' time, I know people have been talking about tokenization. I don't fully understand it, but maybe that will be the next technology coming in after that, or whatever.
Actually, that kind of led me on to the next point I was going to ask you, which is like, you mentioned like, mutual funds 100 years old. They've had like a really long run of it, but like, and now the kind of the baton's being passed over to ETFs. But like in life, nothing lasts forever. Like you evolve and you change. So I'm sure the ETF wrapper will be taken over by something at some point in the future. Like we'd be stupid to think otherwise. But when you kind of look into your magic ball and look into the future, what would that something else be? Will it kind of be more like tokenized or blockchain, where like the concept of the fund, the wrapper, just kind of goes away? Can you see that happening?
Yeah, no, I think sort of like obviously the technology even behind ETFs is a sort of adaptation of 100-year-old technology in that mutual funds. And I think the current setup you have with custodians, fund administrators calculating the NAV, and it's a very cumbersome. And I'm sure technology can replace a lot of that, and our industry will change. And I think a good example is that we probably see it more in emerging markets, like I think Tencent with their money market funds. I think those tokenized. So I think in sort of developing markets, you're probably going to see that technology emerging first. I think in Europe, US, where you've got the status quo, it's almost like they're skipping from nothing, skipping the mutual fund and the ETF, going straight to tokenization. So I think that will happen. I think like ETFs have probably got a good at least 10 to 15 years probably to sort of continue what they're doing, and maybe even longer. But yeah, they will be challenged, and I think as long as the new technology comes in, gives people choice, lower cost, more value for money, then no bad thing for investors.
True, very true. You sound like a man who like really loves doing what he's doing. You love the ETF industry, but if you weren't doing what you were doing, if you like money was no object, you could do anything else with your life, what would you do?
Oh wow. Good question. I was thinking about like I enjoy traveling, seeing the world,
right?
And I enjoy sports. So I was thinking like, how can I link the two together? And I like sports like cricket. So I thought I could become a cricket commentator. So just go around the world watching cricket.
I thought you were going to say become a professional cricket player, but
no, not good enough for that. So, that would be pretty cool, right? Sorry,
that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, you listen to the guys on the radio or TV, and they sound like they're having a good time. Or the other thing I was thinking was, it's off TV at the moment, but apply for a role on Top Gear. I think that they always seem like they're having fun, don't they? But I think always difficult to think about. But anything that would satisfy my passion for traveling and sports.
Traveling and sports, nice one. I like it, Manooj. Well, listen, Manooj, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and chat again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.